Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Driti Atri and you're watching Skyline. Now tonight we begin with the one simple question. How close is West Asia to another major war? Every single day there is a new missile strike, a new military warning, a new political statement, and another country that is getting pulled into the crisis. But behind the missiles, behind the fighter jets, behind the headlines, there are real people. Families waiting for soldiers to return home. Pilots flying dangerous missions, civilians wondering whether tomorrow will bring peace or maybe another attack. Tonight we will look at 9 different stories, 9 different developments that together tells the story of a region under pressure. We'll explain what has happened, why it matters, and what could happen next. So let's start with the human cost of this conflict first. Every war has numbers. The number of missiles fired, the number of aircraft deployed, the number of military bases attacked. But perhaps the most painful number is the number of lives lost. According to the Pentagon, the official number of US military personnel killed during the current conflict has risen to 40. The latest death came after the US Navy pilot died in a helicopter crash over the Arabian Sea. Well, the Pentagon also said that more than 400 American service members have been injured during the conflict. Many of those injuries, officials say, involved brain injuries. These are not always visible. A soldier may look completely normal to you, but inside the brain may have suffered damage caused by any sort of explosion or powerful shock waves. Modern warfare is changing. Today's battlefield that's not only dangerous because of bullets, powerful missile blasts, drone attack, repeated explosion, it can leave lasting injuries even when there is no visible wound. Now, as the conflict continues, American forces remain deployed across military bases throughout the West Asia. Every new attack increases the pressure on those troops. Well, every new mission carries another risk, and every casualty raises difficult question back home. How long can this military campaign continue? How much more the United States prepared to sacrifice? Well, for President Donald Trump, the military challenge that is now becoming a political challenge as well. Americans are watching closely. Some believe that strong military action that's absolute necessity. Others fear the conflict could become even larger here. In the meantime, Iran continues to accuse Washington of aggression. The US says it is responding to the threat against forces and allies. Both sides blame each other, and in between, there is violence that continues. This is no longer just about military hardware. It is becoming a story about human lives. And unfortunately, the casualty count, it may not be over yet. But yes, while America is counting its losses, another claim has emerged from the battlefield. One that suggests that Iran is trying to show that it can strike US positions across the region. Can you imagine waking up, hearing air raid sirens, and then watching missiles streak across the sky? Well, that was the tense situation after reports emerged of missile that was heading towards Jordan. Iranian state media claimed that Iranian forces targeted a US military base in Jordan as part of retaliation for recent American strike. However, Jordan presented a very different picture here. Jordanian authorities said that their air defense system intercepted incoming missiles before they could reach their intended target, which is a good news, by the way. But at this stage, several details remain disputed. Different governments are offering different versions of their event. But one fact is becoming increasingly clear. American military facilities across West Asia are under growing pressure. Now, from Iraq to Syria, from Jordan to Bahrain, many US bases now face the possibility of missile or maybe drone attack if tension continue to rise. And that creates a serious military challenge. The US has thousands of personnel who are stationed across West Asia, protecting every base, every single runway, every fuel depot, and every aircraft. That is becoming increasingly difficult for them. And at the very same time, President Donald Trump, he has been sending another message to America's Gulf allies. He has argued that wealthy regional partners should contribute more towards their own security and defense. His message? Straightforward. If America provides the security umbrella, its partners should share more of financial burden. But you know what? That debate is not really new. But during an active regional crisis, it becomes much more significant because every missile fired, every interception, and every military deployment that carries a lot of cost. The question now is simple though: is this another round of retaliation? Or is the region entering a cycle where every single strike leads to another one? History tells us that cycle can be very, very difficult to stop. And yes, while missiles continue to dominate the headlines, another number is quietly telling an equally important story: the sheer scale of America's military presence across West Asia. Let's pause for a moment here. Have you ever wondered why the United States keep tens of thousands of troops thousands of kilometers away from their home? The answer lies in geography. It lies in energy, trade, and decades of military alliances. According to reports, more than 50,000 US soldiers are currently stationed across West Asia. They are spread across multiple countries. Some operate air bases, some protect naval facilities, others help train partner militaries. Many are responsible for missile defense system. These deployments that do not happen overnight, they are a result of decades of American involvement in the region. But today, those troops are operating in a much more dangerous environment. While here, Washington and Tehran continue to accuse each other of violating understanding aimed at reducing tension. Each side says that the other is responsible for recent escalation. As trust disappears, the risk of miscalculation that grows. Sometimes wars do not begin because leaders actually want one. Sometimes war begins because one missile is misunderstood. One drone crosses a border, one military commander reacts, and suddenly neither side can step back. Well, here military experts, they often warn that this is one of the biggest danger during periods of high tension. Not only deliberate attacks, but accidents, miscommunication, or maybe unexpected events. And that is why every missile moment, it is now being watched very, very carefully. And that is why every military moment is being watched. Every bomber deployment, every aircraft carrier, every missile battery, every radar system, because together they tell us whether countries are preparing for peace or preparing for something much bigger. Well, the coming days will be very important. Diplomacy still has a chance here, but military preparation are also continuing at full speed. The question now is not only whether the fighting will continue, it is whether more countries will become involved, and if they do, then the consequences could reach far beyond West Asia. Now, hopping on to our fourth segment tonight. As I said, wars are usually measured by missiles, fighter jets, and military operations. But sometimes the biggest impact, it is felt somewhere that is completely unexpected. This time, it is at Israel's busiest airport, Ben Gurion Airport. It is now facing a problem that has nothing to do with passenger demand and everything to do with growing military confrontation with Iran. According to Israeli officials, 33 American refueling tankers and aircrafts are currently parked at Ben Gurion Airport. These aircraft occupy parking spaces that are normally used by commercial airlines. As tension with Iran has increased again, a planned withdrawal of several US refueling aircraft has reportedly been put on hold. The Israeli airport security is now warning that if this situation continues, airlines may have to reduce flight operation from the beginning of August. That could affect thousands of passengers during one of the busiest travel seasons of the year. But wait, can you think about it? A military crisis that is no longer staying on the battlefield. It is now affecting airport operation, travel plans, tourism, business trips, and ordinary families waiting to board a flight. Israeli aviation officials, they say that contingency plan has already been prepared with the US. According to those officials, if security conditions worsened, American refueling aircraft would immediately return to Ben Gurion Airport. Following the latest escalation, that is exactly what has happened. Now, these aircraft, they are not an ordinary military plane. They play a very, very important role in modern air warfare. Without aerial refueling, fighter jets cannot remain in the air for long-distance missions. Bombers cannot travel as far. Military operations become much more difficult. And that is why every additional refueling aircraft arriving in Israel, that sends an important strategic message. It suggests that military planners are preparing for a different kind of possibility if tension continue to rise. But yes, at the very same time, civilian life continues to pay the price here. A family planning a holiday, a student flying overseas, a business traveler catching an international flight. All of them could now face delays because of a conflict unfolding hundreds of kilometers away from the airport itself. And that is how modern conflicts spread, right? Not through bombs, but through everyday life. But yes, while military preparation continue on one side, the diplomatic battle is becoming just as intense on the other. Our next story takes us from Israel to Britain, where a political decision has triggered a sharp reaction from Tehran. Sometimes a diplomatic statement can create as much tension as a military strike. Well, that's exactly what has happened between Britain and Iran. The British government has announced new measures targeting support for Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, commonly known as the IRGC. British officials say that the move is aimed at preventing foreign states from using proxy groups for activities such as surveillance, intimidation and sabotage inside the United Kingdom. Well, the whole decision, it follows investigation into a series of incidents including attacks on Jewish sites in Britain, which the UK authorities says involved a group backed by Iran here. Well, Iran has strongly rejected those allegations though. Tehran says that the IRGC is an official branch of Iran's armed forces and has accused Britain of taking what it calls an unjustified and irresponsible decision. Iran's foreign minister, Mr. Abbas Araghchi, he argues that targeting a state institution violates international law. So once again, we are seeing two completely different narratives. Britain says it is protecting national security. Iran says Britain is politicizing security issue and unfairly targeting one of its official military institutions. Well, the whole dispute, it is important because it goes far beyond two nations. The IRGC has long been at the center of international disagreement. The US has already designated the whole organization under its own legal framework. Several Western governments have increased sanctions over the years. However, Iran continues to insist that the IRGC is a legitimate part of its national defense structure. And yes, as diplomatic relations become more strained, the chances of rebuilding trust, that becomes even smaller. And in today's West Asia, trust is already in short supply. Every political decision, every sanction, every diplomatic accusation, it adds another layer to an already complicated crisis. But yes, diplomacy is not the only battlefield anymore. Economic power is becoming a geopolitical weapon too. And our next story is a perfect example of how businesses, politics, and defense, all three are becoming deeply connected. Now, when we think about geopolitics, we usually think about presidents, prime ministers, generals, and diplomats. But what if one of the biggest geopolitical story, it begins inside a company's boardroom? Reports suggest that Qatar Investment Authority, one of the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, it opposed a proposed defense-related partnership including German car maker Volkswagen and Israeli defense company Rafale. According to these reports, the project would have converted Volkswagen unused factory into a production facility for military carrier vehicles that are linked to Israel's defense industry. Well, that includes support system associated with the Iron Dome program. Well, the reported decision, it has attracted international attention because Qatar is one of Volkswagen's largest shareholder through its investment. However, the full details surrounding the proposal, the decision-making process and the extent of shareholders' influence here, that remains publicly disputed. If these reports are actually accurate, then this highlights something much bigger. Today's geopolitical battles, they are not limited to military bases. They are also being fought inside the boardrooms, investment funds, and multinational corporations. Companies today do far more than manufacturing a product. They build technology, supply critical equipment, supply defense industry, and influence global supply chain. That means major investment decisions can sometimes carry geopolitical consequences. Well, for the workers at Volkswagen's factory, the uncertainty that continues. Reports suggest the factory has been struggling with lower production and many employees, they are waiting to see what comes next. For governments, the episode shows how closely economics and national security have become interconnected. A decision taken in one boardroom, it echoes across continents. It can affect jobs, defense planning, diplomatic relationship, and international politics. Well, the modern world is deeply interconnected. Sometimes a missile changes the headline. Sometimes an investment decision does exactly the same thing. Well, so far tonight we have talked about the United States, Iran, Britain, Israel, and Qatar. But another player is once again making headlines: the Houthis in Yemen. That's right, fresh reports have emerged of explosions near the Saudi city of Jeddah after the Houthi reportedly launched another strike towards Saudi Arabia. At the time of these reports, there has been no official Saudi confirmation about the reported explosion, and several details remain unclear. The Houthis have repeatedly said that their military actions are linked to the wider regional conflict. They have also warned of further action unless what they described as a restriction around Sana'a airport come to the end. Saudi Arabia has not publicly responded to these latest claims. And now, you may be wondering, why are Houthis really involved in the conflict that seems to be central around Iran and the United States? Well, the answer goes back several years. The Houthis are an armed group based in Yemen. Over the years, they have emerged as one of the most powerful non-state actors in West Asia. Western governments have long accused Iran of providing the Houthis with military and financial support. Tehran has consistently, though, denied direct controlling Houthi operation, although both the ends acknowledge political ties. Since the Gaza war began, the Houthis have repeatedly said that they are acting in support of what they call the axis of resistance. Their operation has expanded far beyond Yemen's border, targeting shipping routes in the Red Sea and launching missile and drone towards Israel and at times towards Saudi Arabia. That is what worries military planners here. Well, the whole conflict that's no longer limited to two nations now. It is spreading through allied groups, and that too across West Asia. And not just that, every new front, it creates another challenge for the opponent here. Every missile launch from Yemen forces another country to activate its air defense system. Every interception, it costs money. Every military deployment stretches resources even further. Now, whether these latest reports are fully confirmed or not, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The conflict is no longer confined to one border. Every few days, another country finds itself linked to the crisis. Missiles, drones, interception, warning. The list that keeps on growing. And every new incident increases the risk that another regional power, it could become directly involved. Here, military experts often warn that once multiple countries begin exchanging strikes, controlling escalation becomes much harder. Because every retaliation creates pressure for another response, and every response creates another cycle of uncertainty. Well, the entire West Asia, it has experienced this pattern before, if you remember. Small incidents have sometimes grown into much larger confrontation, and that is exactly why governments around the globe are watching these developments so closely. Well, the concern now is whether history is beginning to repeat itself or not. But yes, while missiles dominate today's headlines, another story has raised question about something very, very different. Intelligence operation, covert mission, and one of Iran's most controversial former leader. Not every geopolitical battle is fought on the battlefield. Some are fought in complete secrecy, far away from television cameras, far away from missile launches, and away from public attention. Now, this particular week, a report attracted international attention after making explosive allegation involving Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, and former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Well, according to report, there were alleged efforts years ago to establish contract with the ex-president as he was emerging in Iranian politics. Well, the report further claims that the operation eventually collapsed during the recent Iran crisis. It is very important to note that these are claims which are not independently verified till now, and neither Israel nor the US authorities have publicly confirmed the allegations. So the question is, why has this report generated so much discussion? Because it reminds us that intelligence agencies often play a role long before military conflict become visible. Every major country has intelligence organization. Israel has Mossad, the United States has CIA, Britain has MI6. Many other countries operate intelligence agencies whose job is to gather information, understand potential threat, and advise their governments. Well, most of their work never becomes public. Sometimes classified documents are released years later. Sometimes former officials they write books about past operations. Sometimes media organizations like us publish reports based on anonymous resources. And sometimes those reports remain invisible to independently verify. And that is exactly why it is very important to separate verified facts from allegations. In today's digital era, dramatic headlines travel very quickly. A report published in one country, it can become global news within minutes, but speed that never replaces verification. But for viewers trying to understand international affairs, the distinction matters. Well, there is a difference between an official confirmation, an intelligence assessment, a media report, and an unverified allegation. Understanding those differences help us better understand how the world works. Well, regardless of whether this particular report is ever confirmed or disapproved, one thing remains true. Modern conflicts are not fought only with missiles or fighter jets. They are also fought through intelligence gathering, cyber operations, surveillance, diplomacy, and information. And yes, our final story tonight takes us away from missiles and military bases and into another battlefield altogether: the world of international law. The Trump administration has sharply criticized the International Criminal Court, better known as the ICC. US Secretary of State Mr. Marco Rubio, he has described the court as an institution that threatens American sovereignty. He has argued that the ICC should not have the authority to investigate or prosecute American personnel without the consent of the US. The administration is now considering a series of measures against the court and individuals who are connected to it, including sanctions and visa restriction. Supporters of this particular approach, they say that every country has the right to protect its own soldiers, diplomats, and officials from what they believe are politically motivated investigations. Critics strongly disagree. They argue that ICC was created to investigate the world's most serious crimes involving war, in fact, crime against humanity and genocide. They believe that international institutions should be able to investigate such allegations regardless of how powerful a country is. But let me explain you what is ICC. It is an international court based in The Hague in the Netherlands. Its purpose is to prosecute individuals or countries accused of some of the most serious crimes under the international law. However, the relationship between the United States and ICC, it has always been complicated. Washington has supported some international justice efforts over the years, but it has consistently opposed giving the ICC jurisdiction over US citizens without American approval. Now, that disagreement, it has existed across multiple administrations, although different presidents, they have handled the issue in different ways. And now the debate has once again returned to the global spotlight. This is no longer only a legal argument. It has become a geopolitical issue because every major international institution depends on cooperation between countries. When powerful nations challenge those institutions, the impact is felt across international system. Well, the bigger question now is this: how should international court work in an increasingly divided world? Well, should international court have the authority to investigate everybody equally, or should international governments have the final say over their own citizens? Well, there are strong arguments on both the ends, and that debate is unlikely to end anytime soon. As military tension continue to rise across West Asia, diplomatic disagreements and legal battles are also becoming more intense. Today's conflict are fought in many different ways, with missiles, with sanction, with intelligence, with diplomacy, with economic pressure, and sometimes inside the international courtrooms. And with that, here we come to an end of tonight's Skyline, ladies and gentlemen. We begin with rising human cost. In the conflict, we examined the growing pressure on American forces in West Asia. We looked at how regional tension are affecting airports, diplomacy, business, intelligence, and international law. One thing is becoming increasingly clear though: the West Asian crisis is no longer affecting just one country. Every new development is influencing another. A military strike affects diplomacy, a diplomatic decision affects trade, an economic move influences security, and the legal dispute becomes part of a geopolitical competition. Well, that's why understanding the full picture is more important than ever, because headline tells us what happened, context explain why it happened, and that is exactly what we aim to bring you every day on Skyline. I'm Driti. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.